Hello and welcome back to the ADHD biography. On today's episode, I'm joined by the amazing Dr. Ellie Scott Gray. Ellie sat down with me, shared her story about what it was like working in the healthcare industry, which ultimately led to burnout and to her diagnosis, and then how she's reinvented herself and found a career that works with her brain. There's plenty of takeaways in this episode, so let's get into it. And make sure you like, subscribe and follow this channel if you haven't already to help keep real conversations coming your way. Thank you for joining me, Ellie. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Currently in Glasgow where the weather is a bit minging, but apart from that, yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Now, with the weather in Glasgow, does it always rain? Or is that
Um,
a myth?
well, I'm not gonna lie. So I live, yeah, in Glasgow, it rains a lot. I can't lie. I can't lie. But I feel like because the people are so nice, like people here are really chatty, it makes up for it.
Oh, that's so good then.
Exactly, exactly. But yes, it does rain a lot. I can't lie. It
Amazing.
does.
Talk to me about obviously your transition from being a doctor.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I haven't practiced clinical medicine now for a year, which is
Wow.
insane. Because, I always thought I was going to be a doctor forever, like I suppose when you go into medical school, you don't think that you're not going to be a doctor until you retire. So it was quite a shock to me that I left medicine in the end. But yeah, went through med school, went through my training, and unfortunately I graduated peak COVID, so 2020. And it was such an intense experience. It was really, really difficult. Um, and over my training, and I even moved to Australia to try and see, oh, is it the NHS that I hate, or is it being a doctor? Like, what is it? Turns out neither. Plot twist, it's neither. Or all the above. It's unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, now that I understand myself a lot more, but I have ADHD, and I was diagnosed a year ago now, which is around the same time that I left medicine. And it was a complete shock to me. I wasn't expecting it at all. But it explained why I found life so hard and why I really, really struggled being a doctor. So that time was really turbulent, but I don't regret my decision leaving medicine at all. And I still work within the medical field. I've just tried to change medicine to fit my life rather than trying to change myself to fit medicine. And yeah, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm really having a good time.
That's amazing stuff, and it's really good that you obviously found your calling now.
Hmm.
How was that transition? Obviously, you spend so long training to be a doctor as well. Um, it's quite. I mean, I don't profess to know everything that you have to go through to be a doctor, of course, but from what I've heard, it's quite an extensive period. So how have you managed to sort of recreate yourself? How have you found doing that coming away from being a doctor?
It's been a really difficult process because, I dedicated a decade of my life to medicine. I did 6 years of medical school, and then I did 4 years of clinical practice. And I intensely tied my identity to being a doctor. And I think most medics do. I think that's just part and parcel of it. Not only just because we dedicate so much of our life to medicine, but also society sees us in a certain way. All our friends are doctors. And, even like university, you get in a lot of debt because you're in uni for so long. Like it's so multifactorial. And in all honesty, like I was starting to figure out that I didn't want to be a doctor in the traditional sense, even during medical school. Like even during my fourth year of medical school, I was thinking, oh, something's not right, something's not fitting. And that continued all the way through my training. Um, and even though I clicked on relatively early that maybe medicine isn't for me, even letting go of my career in the traditional sense, it was really difficult. And I almost had to mourn the person I thought I was going to be. I thought I was going to be this high flying intensivist, like work in ICU or be a surgeon or whatever. And I'm nowhere near that now. Like, that's not the path I took at all. And even though now I am incredibly happy, and it was definitely the right choice, and I'm so much more calm and settled, it was a really difficult time. I can't even really explain how hard it is letting go of a medical career. And it sounds so not cheesy. Cheesy is not the right word. It sounds so melodramatic, but it's true. Like it was a really, really difficult transition, but the right one for me.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's really hard letting go. I think even without being a doctor, letting go of something that is feels like it's your personality, and it
Yeah.
is a lot of it. Especially with ADHD as well, because you don't, when you're kind of coming away from something and you're connected with people as well
Hmm.
within that industry as well, coming away from that. Was there a sense or feeling that you was maybe letting them down almost at all by doing?
Yeah. 100%. I felt like I was letting everybody down. I felt like I was letting my patients down, my colleagues. I even felt like I was letting my family down. Like it was really hard having to tell people, oh, by the way, I've decided to leave medicine because there was a lot of guilt. Like you're so spot on. There was so much guilt. I felt like I was letting people down. The NHS put so much effort into training you as a medical professional. And then at the end to be like, oh, sorry, I've changed my mind. I've changed my mind. Like that was really hard. And even though, telling my family I didn't want to be a doctor anymore, they were all great. I think because, a lot of people are understanding these days that being a medical professional is really difficult, and the NHS is losing more doctors and nurses and other medical professionals than ever before because it is so difficult. So my family were very understanding, but strangers have not been the most understanding, which I was really surprised about, particularly at weddings, I've had strangers cry at me, like literally like
Oh,
hold my
really?
hand and cry. And I've said, you're ruining your life. What are you doing? I've had an old lady on the bus tell me I'm ruining my life. And it's so bizarre. It was so intense. And at the start, it really affected me because I was like, oh my goodness, like have I made the right decision? Like, what's happening? Now I'm very comfortable in saying, look, I understand where you're coming from, but this is the right decision for me, and I'm a lot happier. That took a long time to get to that point. It was a really tricky process. Uh, but yeah, like I still can't believe how intensely some people react when I tell them that I'm not a doctor anymore. Like it's a lot, but I do understand where they're coming from. Like I get it. It also must be quite scary. I mean, it's scary for me included, just a human in general in the UK, just seeing so many health professionals leave the NHS. Like it's quite a intense experience.
But I think with being a doctor as well, it's one of those sort of careers that people put you on this pedestal and think that
Yeah.
you're sort of amazing when there's a human being behind that. And I
Hmm.
think sometimes people maybe don't see that. Is that right?
I think so. Like, obviously, people, I think people are aware that medical professionals are human beings to a point. And I don't, yeah, I don't really know how to explain it. I think we are sometimes seen as being like superhuman, and that we've got the skills to be able to cope with a lot of the trauma that we experience, a lot of the difficulties that we experience, but that's not always the case. And when you're working in a structure as well where you're not really getting looked after all the time by your employer, it can cause a lot of stress. And I don't think the general public completely understands that. But when you're not living it day to day, like why would you necessarily?
In terms of obviously talking about ADHD, and your time kind of within that, how did that impact you on a day-to-day basis?
As a doctor or just like throughout my entire life?
um, as a doctor, and
Yeah.
then either or, because it does show up. I don't think you can choose a location where
Yeah,
it
that's
doesn't
true.
show up.
That's so
So
true.
let's go with both.
So yeah, well, because we're already on the doctor topic,
Mm.
yeah, so my ADHD it massively affected me as a medical student and as a doctor. But I didn't know it was ADHD because I was only diagnosed a year ago. So I honestly just thought I was a really broken, weak person. I didn't know why I was behaving the way that I was, why I found life so much more chaotic than everybody else. And something that I look back at that I really feel for, like old Dr. Ellie
Mm.
is, so I have quite significant sensory issues. particularly with sound, texture, temperature, that kind of thing. But I didn't know this until relatively recently. And I would have meltdowns regularly, like overwhelming, intense, crying, hiding in a cupboard meltdowns. And when you don't know where that's coming from, you think you are crazy. You're just like, why am I having to cry in a cupboard every day? Or, even, as a student, I would be like in the club, having a party, and I'd be
Mm.
loving it, like listening to music. And then all of a sudden I would feel this rush of overwhelm and I would have to run away and either hide in the toilet, hide in the cupboard, or I would run home and just cry on my own and calm myself and try and calm myself down. And I didn't tell anybody because I was so embarrassed because I
Yeah.
didn't know anyone else that was acting in that way. And it took me 28 years to realize that it was overwhelm. It was either overstimulation or my sensory issues. And now I have like no meltdowns because I know how to cope with it a lot better. But yeah, it massively affected me, especially like hospitals are loud, bright, really chaotic.
Like
So I felt
every sort of
overwhelmed.
sensory overload that you
Yeah,
could imagine. Yeah.
100%. I was constantly overloaded. And so, two of the main things that make ADHD really bad are stress and lack of sleep. And that's the
As a
definition of
doctor,
being a
that's the
doctor.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I honestly felt like sometimes out of control. Like, I'm not going to lie, there were some jobs that I did love. I worked in ICU and I had a really supportive team and I didn't do any night shift. So, that was pretty amazing. But there were other jobs that I look back at and I just think, oh, Ellie, like thinking about myself, just thinking, oh, I actually can't believe that you went through that. And I didn't really know to ask for help either because I just didn't understand what was happening. So yeah, my heart my heart really bleeds for myself. Yeah, so it massively affected me, yeah, significantly.
And obviously, coming away from being a doctor now, how have you shaped your life and career to suit you and your brain?
Yeah, so I had to make a massive change in my life. Um, I was diagnosed with ADHD because I was suffering from severe burnout. In hindsight, I probably started to burn out in my fourth year of medicine. And so I was burnt out for about 5 years and it kind of ebbed and flowed, but it definitely got worse and worse and worse. And I moved to Australia and I burnt out even more and it massively affected my mental and my physical health. Like I think you and I have briefly discussed this before when we've been chatting, but not only was I like depressed and anxious and brain foggy and had all those ADHD symptoms going on, but I had like this immune response and my hair started falling out and I got severe acne. And it was because all of those things were happening that I then got diagnosed with ADHD. I was diagnosed out of crisis. So after my diagnosis, I, left my job and I had to come back to the UK because this was all happening in Australia. And I had to take 5 months off. I took 5 months off work, which was really scary because I've been working since I was 13, which is technically illegal, but I have. I've been working since I
We
was
won't tell,
13.
other
Yeah,
than it's going
secret. Don't tell
online.
anyone, guys. Don't tell anyone. Uh, but yeah, and so I had to make this huge shift, not only with how was I going to start thinking about work, but how I was going to exist as a human. Like I had to relearn how to live my life. And that was a really scary process. And I do feel very, very lucky that, I had a supportive partner. I had a house that like we have to like live together in, and I had some savings. So I was very, very lucky from that perspective. And yeah, and I had to heal really from my burnout. So I started to feel better, not fully better, but like a little bit better after like 5 months. But I just knew I couldn't go back to be a doctor. I just couldn't do it. I was like, oh, I need to think about what I could do. And I was thinking like, what job is like kind of low stakes, kind of fun. And also like during burnout, I lost a lot of my confidence. Like I just became this really small, introverted person, which is someone I'd never been before. And so I thought I need to find a job where I can rebuild my confidence. And so I became a bartender. I was like, I need to do something. Not a bartender, sorry, a barista. I did try and be a bartender, and it was too loud. I
I
was
was
up
I
too
was
late.
gonna say
Yeah.
that's probably the second best job for sensory overload as well, isn't it?
Oh my good. Yeah, I tried because I was a bartender
Mhm.
for a long time. So I went and tried a shift in very lovely place, very lovely people, but I'm too much of an old lady to work there now. I can't do it. Can't do it. So then I became a barista, which was so much fun. It was honestly exactly what I needed. And that was a bit of a tricky process as well because I'd gone from like being a doctor and having a
Mm,
very different wage to when I was working as a barista, particularly because as a barista, I was only working 2 days a week because I had to figure out how I could work again. Like, 'cause I was convinced I was never going to be able to work ever again.
yeah.
I was like, and I was really, really scary. So I started off small. I became a barista, which I loved. It was so much fun and it was so nice being in that creative environment and being around really cool people that do lots of different things. Really, really enjoyed it. And then over time, as my confidence built and my burnout started depleted, and I started to understand what my brain and body needs from an ADHD perspective, I then started having this thing called a portfolio career, which I'd never heard of before until like a year ago. And I think it's just like a fancy way of saying I have like 5 jobs. But
I
it
was gonna
works really
say for
well.
those of us who don't have portfolio careers, yeah.
Yeah, it just
What
means
are
I've
the
got.
five? What are the five jobs?
So what am I doing at the moment? So I have really cut down on my barista work, which is sad, but I want to prioritize different things.
Hmm.
So I do some ADHD education, which I really enjoy. So at the moment, that really involves I'm creating some educational platforms for people to learn about ADHD. I also do some freelance writing, which I really enjoy. I do some consulting, which, oh my God, I feel like such a grown up, like doing consulting. Like,
Consulting is a
wow.
very big job. I mean, doctor is as
Yeah.
well, but consulting's definitely up there.
Like,
But
I feel, yeah, just like on another planet. I can't believe I've done a consulting job. So yeah, I do some consulting. And what else do I do? I also do some marketing and content creation for a startup that help medical professionals move out of their traditional careers into alternative careers, and that's called Health Career Transitions. And honestly, like I love everything that I do, and having lots of different jobs that are a little bit creative and I can dot between them all and have lots of different stuff going on at once. That suits my brain so well. And I never thought it would, but it really does. And it keeps me on my toes. So I have come to realize doing all those little bits rather than just having one singular job, I really enjoy. I think it works really well for me.
does that variety of work really help to bring the best out and work best with your brain?
It definitely does. I love the variety. I also love how much I'm learning. Like, I feel really lucky that the people that I've spoken to and that I'm working to are these really amazing, intelligent, creative people. And I always feel like I've got like mentors that kind of teach me all this really exciting stuff that they know. And I've always loved, painting, writing, being creative. And when I was at school, I was like, oh, do I want to be like a writer or a painter, or do I want to be a doctor? And I chose doctor, but I've really missed this creative element of my life. And so I've been learning some like graphic design and marketing and all this really cool stuff that I'm excited to like learn more and more and more about. And that variety, that creativity, it makes me want to work, It's so nice doing some jobs. And I mean, don't get me wrong, this is not every day. There are days that I don't want to work. But most of the time, I do actually want to work. Like, I want to do the stuff that I have to do. Whereas, like, when I was a doctor, obviously my burnout was a massive contributor. Because unfortunately, when you get burnout, you just become a bit apathetic and don't really find joy in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I just remember being a doctor and thinking, like, I actually cannot believe I have to go to work. And I'd cry on the way to work and I'd cry on the way back. And I would like look at my future and think, I actually can't believe this is my life and I need to do this every day. Like I was really devastated by it. Whereas now because I've picked a life that I think is more suited to my ADHD brain, I am really excited about what could happen in the future. Particularly from a career standpoint, I think that's really exciting. Yeah, I'm I'm buzzed. I can't lie, I'm buzzed. As I said, that's not every single day, but today definitely. Today I'm buzzed. Today.
Amazing. At least we've got one day of buzzing.
Yeah, so true, so true.
If people are listening to this who have ADHD and are maybe feeling a little bit burnt out from the job they're doing, or looking for a career change that's more suited to them, whether that's in the creative space or any other kind of industry, what would be your best kind of advice to them on that?
So, particularly from changing career point of view, I think talking to people and creating a community is really important. That is something that I have found incredibly helpful. So all, the work that I'm doing at the moment and the people that I'm working for, that would have not happened if I hadn't of started talking to other people that had left medicine. So I am on LinkedIn, so that's how we met, is through LinkedIn.
Yes.
And I didn't know that LinkedIn was a thing until about 7 months ago. But I kept seeing online, and when I was speaking to like friends of friends who had left medicine, they all said, get on LinkedIn, just start talking about things that interest you, start talking to other people, and maybe you'll get work, maybe something will happen. And it has been a massive success. It's where I've got all my work from that I'm doing now, apart from the barista work. But it hasn't come from me just existing on LinkedIn and writing about stuff. It's from creating a community, from speaking to people that are doing stuff that I would like to do, speaking to people that I find interesting, particularly speaking to ex-medical professionals that are doing other stuff. They have been integral into my journey because they've shown me that my skills are transferable, that there's a lot more stuff that I can do than I think I can. I mean, this goes for anyone, but particularly for people with ADHD, like we have this intense sense of imposter syndrome.
Mm.
And, unfortunately, through our lives, we will not necessarily fit in, or we might be bullied, or we might get in trouble at school or at work for not listening or being able to perform at our potential, those kind of elements. Um, but being able to speak to people that are going through a similar journey to me, it's made me realize, that's not true. I am smart and I can accomplish things, but I wouldn't have realized that on my own.
Yeah.
That's come from talking to other people and speaking about other people's journeys as well, not just my own.
Yeah, certainly. And obviously, following you on LinkedIn with the different advice that you share, now educating people about ADHD as well, which is something that I think is really, really vital. As I know, obviously, there's still a lot of stigma about
Mhm.
ADHD. Do you still find that in terms of that stigma and that sort of lack of recognition?
Sometimes, but honestly, not very often. But I wonder if that's just because of the circles that I'm in. I am heavily surrounded by people in the ADHD space that have ADHD or work with other people with ADHD. But I do know, stigma still exists. Stigma also still exists about ADHD, even in the medical community. Like I remember a couple of years ago, or maybe a year ago, about a year ago now, I was speaking to a fellow doctor. This I think this was just before I was diagnosed, but I was talking about, ADHD and they were like, "Oh, I don't think that's real. Like, I think it's completely made up." And this was another medical professional. So, stigma does exist and it can be really difficult. I think particularly in the workplace,
Mm.
like if you are struggling and then you have a boss who doesn't really believe in ADHD or doesn't see it as a significant issue because like ADHD it can be a disability, it can have dramatically affect people's lives. I know it's like significantly impacted my life. So stigma does exist, but I do think conversations about ADHD are becoming more common. And even things like social media, the media in general, even though sometimes, unfortunately, or a lot of the time, unfortunately, the conversation can be quite negative, there is a lot of also positive conversation, particularly in the social media space. And I think that's changing societal views, I think, slowly, which is exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And having more conversations like this, and being open. Obviously, you're very open about
Hmm.
your experiences of things like burnout, the negatives that come with ADHD, but also the positives as well. Certainly focusing on now the more creative elements that really work with your ADHD. Is there any advice for anyone listening to this, maybe leading a team, that can help to push that change, and kind of make an more inclusive workspace for neurodivergent individuals in their team?
Yeah. I think there's so many things that people can do. It can sometimes be a bit tricky because I think people that have ADHD or autistic or are neurodivergent in some way, we're all so individualized. Like it is a condition, but within that condition, there are so many intense differences. So, for instance, like one of my best friends has ADHD as well, but he doesn't have any sensory issues, where mine can be quite significant. And so I saw somebody, I can't remember what they're called, but they have autism and ADHD, really intelligent man who's written a few books about being neurodivergent. And he referred to it as like a DJ deck and how there's different dials and different things you can turn up and down. And each dial will be a different symptom of ADHD or autism or another neurodivergent disorder. Um, and they can be up or down or off, on, like it can be a bit complicated. But we're living in a time now where I think there are so many wonderful people that are going into organizations and teaching organizations how to better look after their neurodivergent staff, how to make it more inclusive, how to make it more aware. And I also think that the conversations just need to be really empathetic and open-minded and try and be steered by the person that is neurodivergent, because they might need different things to another person. So it just needs to be inclusive, a nice conversation. And as I said, there are really amazing people that you can invite into your organization or into your workplace that can talk to you about the differences about ADHD and autism. But yeah.
So we can get an expert in ADHD. Can I call you an expert, being from a doctor background? We'll go with that.
Yeah,
Expert
I don't know.
consultant
I
on.
don't know.
So someone that does consultancy, and understanding ADHD, like yourself, can go into workplace and educate people.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
so true. Yeah, the imposter syndrome that we were talking about earlier is coming in. I need to be more confident. Yes, yes, I can do
right?
that.
It's hard, isn't it? I know that it's something I struggle with as well. Is that, yeah, that imposter syndrome. Thinking like, should I be in this room with these certain people or in this
Hmm.
position? Sometimes feel like a little bit of a fraud, and people say, "Oh, well, imposter." I saw a post that it kind of irritated me a little bit, to be honest. It said that imposter syndrome is just that you've not practiced something enough, and I was like, that's really
That's
not
not true. That's a lie.
Absolutely. And the workplace can be quite sometimes difficult to navigate with ADHD, can
Hmm.
affect your confidence, as we've just discussed. Is there any tips that you can share that somebody that could take away, that they could put in to help kind of boost their confidence, and so, in the workplace, if it's not necessarily, maybe if they don't want to talk about their ADHD and are trying
Hmm.
to manage it without doing so, is there anything that you could give
Yeah.
from that?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point that you've said, is that like not necessarily everybody will be comfortable talking about their ADHD at work, and that's fine. People are at different levels. There's of like confidence and comfort about speaking about these things, and there's no right or wrong answer, at all. Just like do it the way that you would like to. Things that I have found really helpful when it comes to work and my ADHD is having earplugs. I don't go anywhere these days without earplugs. My sensory issues can be quite significant, so I need to make sure that I'm covering myself from that basis. Having glasses, I'm not wearing them right now, but I've got these little red blue block glasses that I wear when I'm at my computer because I get a lot of migraines, and that's
Mm,
also linked to ADHD. Like
quite a
people with
common thing, isn't
ADHD,
it? Yeah.
yeah, are more prone to migraines, so I need to look after myself from that point of view. Take regular breaks as well, that's important. Exercise, is a really big thing for people with ADHD. So obviously, in an ideal world, exercise every day if you can.
Yeah.
But if you can't, something that I find really helpful is, after an hour, after 2 hours of work or whatever, is go for a walk. And I genuinely will find myself feeling significantly better. I'll be able to work better. Um,
It's that
Diet
change
as
of
well is
scenery,
important.
isn't it? And yeah,
Yeah,
bit of
moving your
fresh
body,
wind.
change of
Yeah.
scenery. Yeah, getting outside, like be outside for at least half an hour a day, at least. And even like having a good diet and just making sure that you're not having too many complex carbohydrates through the day, like pasta and white bread and that kind of thing, because you can get a massive slump from that. And
Mm.
it sounds so simple, but it's
Yeah.
so hard to get on top of sometimes. It really, really is. Like for me, the most important thing in my life is sleep. If I don't sleep, I can't function
Yeah.
at all. And there are days where, like yesterday, my boyfriend was like, "Oh my goodness, Ellie, why have you got so much energy? Why are you like so excited about life today?" And I was like, "It's because I slept for 8 hours all the way through. Like that is why.
Yeah.
It's because I just slept and I woke up and it was amazing." But that's like such a basic thing, but I find sleep so hard. Like I'm a massive insomniac. And so it's fine to like say these tips, but sometimes it can be difficult to implement them. So I think the number one thing is like be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself, be patient. Self-compassion is really important. There've been so many studies that have shown people that are self-compassionate will actually go further in life and accomplish more. And I know that's so hard, particularly if you are in the pits of ADHD and you feel like your brain's not working and you are struggling to even like feed yourself. And sometimes, like having a shower can be the most difficult thing in the world. Um, but that self-compassion is actually, I think, the number one most important thing, you know.
Yeah, it really is throughout on a daily basis. Like you say, it's sometimes hard to keep up those things like whether it be good diet, exercise every day, things, peaks and troughs I find with ADHD in those
Hmm.
in those elements, trying to keep on top of everything, and almost kind of keep the perfect life in a sense of keeping up everything can be quite hard. So definitely echo that in terms of the biggest thing to be consistent with is being kind to yourself when
Yeah.
some things are falling down, because it's so easy to beat yourself up a little bit more with ADHD, isn't it?
Hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that we're amazing at, isn't it? It's just beating ourselves up. Uh, but yeah, and it's a hard thing to let go of,
Yeah.
It's hard.
Thank you for sharing all your tips today, Ellie. Really appreciate it. You've given some really great insights about people that might be looking to change careers or struggling with burnout and creating awareness in the space. I think everything that you're doing is amazing. So please keep it coming. I look forward to see what's coming up next in your portfolio.
Oh, you've made my day. That was so nice. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.